Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this comforting expectation of precision, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's very binary. A
Yeah.
localized problem with a localized solution.
Exactly. Like it's like engineering. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray goes up on the screen, and the doctor just points to a jagged white line and says, there it is.
Right. Broken or not broken, it's super clean.
Clean, exactly. But then you step into the world of human endurance, into the psychology of extreme suffering and the absolute limits of what a human being can withstand. And
The
suddenly,
X-ray machine is just completely useless.
totally useless.
Right.
We are looking at a landscape that is murky, it's highly complex, and honestly just completely fascinating. So today we're doing a deep dive into the ultimate limits of human endurance. We're exploring the psychology required to overcome massive obstacles and the exact daily systems you need to truly level up your life.
Yeah, it really is the definition of pushing the boundaries of what we consider biologically and psychologically possible. And to grasp this, we have to completely rethink our relationship with discomfort. We're pulling some wild insights today from a really fascinating conversation between human biologist Gary Brecka and ultra-endurance athlete Alvaro Nuñez Alfaro.
And to set the stage for exactly what kind of boundaries we're talking about, I want you, the listener, to hold a really specific mental image for a second. Imagine running 6 marathons.
Which, I mean, just that alone is a staggering athletic feat.
Right. But imagine running 6 marathons in 6 days.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and doing it across the Sahara Desert.
It's just absurd.
It is. And add to that the logistical nightmare of having to carry every single calorie of your own food, plus all your survival supplies, on your back.
Like a literal pack mule.
Exactly. And then, just to push it completely over the edge of sanity, imagine you were intentionally lugging around a heavy 45-pound iron plate the entire time, simply to prove a point about mental health.
It sounds like an exaggerated ancient myth, honestly.
Yeah, it really does.
But the reality of what Alvaro did, and more importantly, how he prepared his body and mind to do it, is this meticulously structured blueprint. Because this isn't just a story about extreme sports, right?
No, not at all.
It's a profound look at how anyone listening can reframe their own daily struggles, how you can gamify your habits and turn your deepest obstacles into your greatest advantages.
But before we can even get into the mechanics of how someone successfully runs across a literal desert carrying a dumbbell, we have to establish why. Like, why would anyone voluntarily choose that level of suffering?
Right, especially today.
Exactly. We live in an era of same-day delivery, climate-controlled everything, ergonomic chairs. We basically designed our entire civilization to eliminate friction.
We really have.
But there's this concept introduced early in Alvaro and Gary's discussions that completely flips this modern aspiration upside down. It's the idea that aging is fundamentally the aggressive pursuit of comfort.
I love that phrase so much. It's the perfect starting point because it completely challenges the end goal of modern society.
Yeah.
We are constantly sold this idea that success equals comfort. The wealthier you become, the softer the mattress, the more heavily cushioned the shoes, the less physical exertion you need to get your meals.
Where you just tap an app and food arrives?
Exactly.
That.
But biologically,
Mm.
our bodies are adaptation machines.
Yeah.
When you aggressively pursue comfort, you are basically signaling to your cellular biology that it no longer needs to adapt.
Wow.
You're telling your muscles, your bones, your cardiovascular system that resilience is it's no longer required.
So the body just stops maintaining those systems.
Precisely. It is a strict use it or lose it mechanism. If you stop bearing heavy loads, your osteoblasts literally stop building dense bone.
That makes sense.
If you stop elevating your heart rate, your cardiovascular efficiency plummets. You begin to atrophy. And Alvaro's entire philosophy stands in direct opposition to this.
He's basically running the opposite direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He operates on the belief that obstacles are not excuses to derail your life. They are vital, necessary inputs for growth. You simply cannot trigger growth in a comfortable environment because the body has no biochemical reason to spend energy improving itself.
It makes complete sense biologically. If you wrap a biological organism in bubble wrap, the first time it gets bumped,
It shatters.
it completely shatters. And Alvaro intentionally sought out the biggest bump he could find. He went after the marathon dissobs. Let's break down the brutal reality of this race so we really understand the scale of the stressor here.
Yeah, let's get into it.
It is widely considered the toughest foot race on the surface of the Earth. We're talking 156 miles, over 6 days, across the Sahara Desert.
Just brutal.
Temperatures can reach up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and the terrain isn't like a hard track. It's shifting, unpredictable sand dunes. They just swallow your feet with every step, forcing your stabilizing muscles to work overtime just to keep you upright.
And I think the most crucial element of the Marathon des Sables is the self-sufficiency rule.
Oh, yeah, that's wild.
Right. There is no pit crew waiting every 3 miles with a perfectly chilled electrolyte beverage. There's no caterer at the end of the day. You wear a backpack, and inside that pack is everything you need to survive for a week in a completely hostile environment.
Every single ounce you carry is an ounce you have to drag through deep sand in blistering heat.
Which is exactly why the participants are notoriously obsessed with weight. Most runners spend thousands of dollars on ultralight, high-tech gear.
They will literally saw the handles off their toothbrushes
Yes.
and cut the tags off their shirts just to save a fraction of an ounce.
And then you have Alvaro,
Right.
who wasn't a professional runner, by the way. He's an entrepreneur. Yet he chose to put a solid 45-pound metal plate into his backpack.
It's just mind-blowing. And inscribed on this plate were the words, "The weight of depression."
Which is heavy in every sense of the word. And this wasn't a PR stunt either. It was a profoundly personal mission. Alvaro had lost friends and family members to depression and suicide.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It is. He watched people who seemed to have perfectly put together successful lives suddenly succumb to this invisible disease. And what struck him most was the tragedy of the silence surrounding it. There is this pervasive stigma that asking for help is a sign of weakness.
Especially for men.
Right, particularly for men who are also culturally conditioned to internalize and hide their emotional struggles.
So he wanted to take that invisible psychological burden and manifest it physically. He wanted to visually demonstrate that this weight is real, it's heavy, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
The message was so clear. Carrying this weight alone will destroy you, and opening your mouth, going to therapy, asking for help, that's the ultimate sign of strength.
His goal was to carry this heavy symbol of their struggle across the desert and, at the finish line, literally bury that weight in the sand.
It's a beautiful, deeply poetic mission, but this is where I get stuck on the biology of it all. Because it's one thing to have a metaphorically beautiful purpose, it's incredibly inspiring. But how does a mental concept, no matter how profound, physically prevent the biological machine from shutting down?
That's the big question.
You are literally carrying an iron plate that is destroying your spine while running on shifting sand in 120-degree heat. Eventually, the mechanics just have to fail.
You'd think so.
It doesn't matter how much you love your family or how noble your cause is. If you run an engine without oil, the engine seizes. The body has a hard physical limit.
It's the critical question of extreme endurance. And to understand how Alvaro survived, we have to look at the central governor theory of fatigue.
Okay, what is that?
Well, you're assuming the body shuts down when it actually hits absolute mechanical failure, like when the engine literally has no oil left. But human physiology doesn't actually work like that. The brain is highly conservative. It acts as a governor.
Like a speed limiter on a car.
Exactly like that. Long before your muscles actually tear or your heart actually gives out, your brain starts sending agonizing pain signals and feelings of overwhelming exhaustion to force you to stop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it holds back a massive reserve of your physical capacity, sometimes 30 to 40%, just to ensure survival.
So the pain isn't the body breaking, it's the brain's early warning system trying to scare you into stopping.
Exactly. The pain is a suggestion, not a mechanical mandate. Now, bring in the leadership principle that Alvaro frequently references. When the purpose is greater than the problem shrinks.
Okay, I like that.
When you attack yourself to a purpose vastly bigger than your own comfort, like honoring the memory of loved ones lost to suicide, you are essentially hacking that central governor. You are providing the brain with a counter-narrative.
You're giving it a reason to unlock that final 30%.
Yes. The brain evaluates the pain signals, but your conscious mind assigns a massive existential value to enduring that pain. The brain essentially says, okay, the damage we're taking is severe, but the mission is critical for our perceived psychological survival.
So the physical limits are still there.
Yes, but the psychological threshold for accessing those limits is vastly expanded. The mind stops focusing on the localized pain of a blister and locks onto the names of the people depending on that weight moving forward.
That dynamic is exactly what was put to the ultimate test on day 2 of the Sahara race. We really need to look closely at day 2 because this is the crucible.
Yeah, day 2 is where things get real.
This is the exact moment where the engine warning lights are all flashing red, and that mental framework either holds the engine together or completely shatters.
Because day 2 is notoriously brutal. The romanticism of the challenge has completely evaporated. The adrenaline of the starting line is gone, and the sheer overwhelming reality of the remaining mileage sets in.
And the physical reality for Alvaro at this point was horrific. He's only on the second day, but he's already experiencing acute kidney failure.
Which is terrifying.
He is urinating blood. The skin on his feet is completely destroyed. We're talking massive ulcers and ruptured blisters. His back and shoulders are literally bleeding because the friction of a 45-pound iron plate grinding against his skin through a backpack.
For dozens of miles.
Right. It acts like a cheese grater.
And that kidney failure is a classic symptom of extreme endurance trauma known as rhabdomyolysis. His muscle tissue was literally breaking down and dying from the sheer mechanical stress of the weight and the heat.
Wow.
Yeah, and when muscle fibers die, they release their contents,
Yeah.
including a protein called myoglobin, directly into the bloodstream.
And the kidneys have to filter that.
The kidneys then have to filter this massive influx of myoglobin, which they're absolutely not designed to do in such high quantities. It clogs the filtration system, causing acute damage, which is why he was urinating blood. It is a critical medical emergency.
And as if the internal physiological collapse wasn't enough, he is getting devastating environmental feedback. He's looking around the desert and watching top-tier, world-class professional athletes.
The bros.
Yeah, people he had followed on social media for years just for inspiration. He's watching them sit down in the sand, press the SOS buttons on their GPS trackers, and wait for the rescue helicopter.
That psychological contagion is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Humans are deeply social creatures, especially in survival situations. We look to the herd to calibrate our own safety.
Makes sense.
When you are already in agony and you see the people you consider to be the strongest, the most prepared, the alphas of the group giving up, your brain desperately seizes on that as social proof.
It's an out.
Exactly. It provides a completely rational excuse to quit. The brain says, look, the professionals are stopping to avoid dying. We have to stop too.
And the medical staff in the tent were actively advising him to quit. They were pointing to other runners who were shivering under plastic survival bags, basically staring at the Grim Reaper and telling Alvaro that his condition was just as bad, if not worse, because of the extra 45 pounds.
He was really on the absolute brink.
He actually dropped his backpack to the ground. He was fully prepared to press his own SOS button and call the helicopter.
But that is the exact moment where the why intercepts the central governor.
He looked down at the bag and he saw the iron plate. He saw the inscription, "The Weight of Depression." And suddenly, all the names of the people who had messaged him before, the race people who had shared their deepest traumas, who were relying on him to carry their invisible weight in the physical world, they just flooded his mind.
Wow.
He realized that if he quit, he wasn't just dropping a piece of metal, he was abandoning them. So he put the backpack back on his bleeding shoulders.
His response to the medics was simply, there's a bigger purpose in here than myself. And the psychological mechanism he used to keep moving is so crucial. He didn't look at the horizon and think about the 4 marathons he still had left.
No, that would break anyone.
That would have overwhelmed his nervous system instantly. He drastically shrank his time horizon. He focused entirely on getting back to the starting line of the next stage. Then it was just about putting one foot in front of the other for a single mile.
And the transformation over the next few days is wild. By the time he reached the final day of the race, his mindset had shifted so drastically that he was no longer just trying to drag a half-dead body across the finish line to survive.
He actually believed he could win the final stage.
Yeah, and he took off, passing people, and finished among the top runners for that specific day.
That is the profound power of cognitive reframing. And it requires an immense amount of self-awareness to catch your brain in the middle of a downward spiral and actively intercept the neurological trajectory. Alvaro realized in the desert that comparing himself to the failing professionals was destroying his resilience. It robbed him of his own agency. He had to stop the negative self-talk dead in its tracks.
He talked about how he actively changed the labels of his emotions when his brain was screaming, "I'm terrified, I'm afraid." He forced himself to cognitively relabel that exact biological feeling. He started saying out loud, "I am excited."
Which taps into a fascinating psychological concept called arousal congruence. From a purely physiological standpoint, anxiety and excitement are almost identical.
Really? Identical.
Pretty much. Your sympathetic nervous system is activated, your heart rate is elevated, your breathing is shallow, cortisol and adrenaline are flooding your system, your palms are sweating. The biology is the same. The only difference is cognitive. It is the label your prefrontal cortex assigns to that physiological state.
So by just changing the word, you change how the body utilizes the adrenaline.
Exactly. If you label it anxiety, your brain interprets the adrenaline as a threat,
Yeah.
and your behavioral output becomes avoidant. You freeze or you flee.
But if you label it excitement,
Then your brain interprets the exact same adrenaline as preparation for a challenge. Your behavioral output becomes approach-oriented. You lean in. But here's the catchery. Possessing the ability to step back, observe your own thoughts, and change the label while you are in a state of extreme distress doesn't happen by accident. It requires rigorous mental training.
which brings us to another seemingly crazy aspect of Alvaro's preparation, his deep dive into total solitude. Long before the desert, he completed a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat.
Oh man, those are intense.
We're talking about sitting in total silence, meditating for over 12 hours a day, with no eye contact, no speaking, no reading, no phones, for 10 straight days.
For a vast majority of modern humans, that sounds significantly more terrifying than running across the Sahara.
It does, and there is hard data to back that up. There's a study discussed in these conversations that is just absolutely staggering. Researchers placed participants in a quiet room with absolutely nothing to do. No phones, no books, no distractions, just for 15 to 30 minutes.
That doesn't sound too bad.
Right. But they gave them a button that would deliver a painful electric shock if they chose to press it. The results. 65% of the men and 25% of the women preferred to self-administer a painful electric shock, rather than sit quietly with their own thoughts for 15 minutes.
It is one of the most revealing psychological studies of our time.
It's insane.
It highlights a profound epidemic of distraction and internal dissonance. We are terrified of our own minds. The brain has a network called the default mode network, which activates when we're not focused on an external task.
Okay.
It's responsible for self-reflection, daydreaming, and rumination. For many people, when that network turns on in silence, it starts looping negative thoughts, unresolved anxieties, and deep insecurities.
So they would literally rather experience physical trauma than listen to the internal monologue.
Yes, the electric shock provides an immediate, highly intense external stimulus that yanks their attention out of the default mode network and forces them into the present moment. They use physical pain to escape psychological discomfort. But when you do what Alvaro did, when you sit through the excruciating discomfort of your own thoughts for hours and days on end without escaping, you eventually break through that noise. You develop a psychological framework known as equanimity.
Let's really drill down into that word because, equanimity gets thrown around a lot in yoga studios and wellness stuff, but what is the actual mechanism of it in practice?
Think of equanimity like a clutch in a manual transmission car. Without a clutch, the engine is directly connected to the wheels. If the engine revs, the car lurches forward. There is no separation.
Right.
In this analogy, the engine is a stimulus, a blister, an anxious thought, an insult. The wheels are your reaction: panic, anger, quitting. Most people drive without a clutch. Stimulus equals immediate, uncontrolled reaction.
You feel pain, you instantly generate suffering.
Precisely. Equanimity is the clutch. When you develop equanimity, you step on the clutch pedal. You disconnect the stimulus from the reaction.
Well, I like that.
You still feel the engine revving. You still feel the intense pain of the blister. You still hear the anxious thought, but it doesn't force the car to lurch. You can observe the sensation objectively. You feel the physical data of the pain, but you don't add a secondary layer of narrative suffering on top of it.
So you don't think, this is awful, I'm going to die out here, why is this happening to me?
Right. You just note it. There is pain in my foot, and then you calmly decide what gear to shift into next.
It's completely removing the drama from the sensation. So how do you actually apply this reframing to everyday life? Because not everyone listening is running a desert ultramarathon, but everyone is carrying something heavy.
Absolutely everyone.
There's a great example brought up regarding Oprah Winfrey and the philosopher Gary Zukov. Zukov helped Oprah profoundly shift her life trajectory. And when he was asked how he helped her make such massive changes, including losing weight and reshaping her career, he didn't give her a diet plan or a business strategy.
No, he went much deeper.
He said the work started by having her refuse to adopt a negative self-image. He made her stop referring to herself, internally and externally, as a fat person.
Because it all begins with identity architecture. If your internal monologue constantly reinforces a specific negative identity like, I am a failure, I am always anxious, I am bad with money, your brain accepts that as baseline truth.
It just believes you.
Totally. Your actions will naturally, often subconsciously, align to prove that identity correct. Reframing requires that clutch of equanimity. You have to catch that negative thought as it arises, pause, and actively choose a new label. You have to rewrite the foundational software of your mind.
But here's the fascinating twist. You can have the most perfectly optimized mindset in the universe. You can be a Zen master with a bulletproof identity. But you cannot simply think your way through acute kidney failure if the biological machine hasn't been optimized to handle that level of stress.
That is the hard truth.
If we stick with the technology analogies, you can't run a massive next-generation virtual reality program on a dusty old computer from 1998. The software might be brilliant, but the hardware will just crash. You have to upgrade the RAM, install a new graphics card, optimize the cooling system first.
And that is exactly what Alvaro realized. Before he ever stepped foot on the sand, he knew his mindset alone wouldn't save him. He partnered with Gary Brecka, a human biologist, to undergo a rigorous clinical superhuman protocol.
And this wasn't about drinking green smoothies and going for long jogs.
Oh, not even close.
Yeah.
This was a deeply scientific optimization of his cellular biology.
Let's pull apart the exact mechanics of this protocol because this is where the hardware upgrade happens. They didn't just guess what his body needed. They tested everything.
Everything.
They did extensive, comprehensive blood panels and genetic testing to find out exactly where his unique biological baseline was. They looked for specific genetic variations, like the MTHFR gene mutation.
Right, which affects how the body processes folate and methylates vitamins.
Once they had the data, they targeted the deficiencies with sniper-like precision. They optimized his vitamin D3 levels, his B12, and they used DHEA to provide natural endogenous support for his testosterone levels, rather than synthetic hormones.
They were essentially reading the source code of his body and patching the bugs. But the supplementation was just the foundation. They incorporated daily clinical therapies that sound like they belong on a spaceship, but are profoundly effective for cellular health.
Like what?
Well, for example, they utilized red light therapy. Now, this isn't just warming the skin. Specific wavelengths of red and near-infrared light penetrate the tissue and are absorbed by the mitochondria in your cells, specifically an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase.
The mitochondria are the powerhouses, right? They make the energy.
Exactly. They produce ATP, which is cellular energy. The red light essentially kicks that enzyme into overdrive, allowing the cells to produce more ATP more efficiently. This accelerates tissue repair and reduces inflammation systemically.
That's amazing.
And they also used magnetic field therapies, often known as PEMF or pulsed electromagnetic field therapy.
Okay, wait. How does a magnet help a runner?
That's a great question. Think of your cells like tiny batteries. They have a transmembrane potential, which is basically a voltage difference between the inside and outside of the cell wall.
Okay.
When you are fatigued, injured, or sick, that voltage drops. PEMF therapy passes a very mild electromagnetic field through the body, which essentially acts like a wireless charger for your cells. It restores that transmembrane potential so nutrients can flow in and waste can flow out more efficiently.
That is wild. A literal wireless charger for your body. They also heavily utilized oxygen therapy, forcing high levels of oxygen into the tissues, and Gary had Alvaro switch his primary hydration entirely to hydrogen water.
Yes, hydrogen water.
Which initially sounds like a marketing gimmick. I mean, water's already H2O. It already has hydrogen. Why add more?
It is a really common misconception. The hydrogen in H2O is bound to oxygen, so it isn't free to interact with other molecules. Hydrogen water has extra molecular hydrogen gas H2 dissolved into it.
Oh, I see.
Molecular hydrogen is the smallest molecule in the universe, meaning it can easily cross the blood-brain barrier and penetrate deep into cellular structures. Its primary benefit is that it acts as a highly selective antioxidant.
Selective. What does that mean?
It means it seeks out and neutralizes the most toxic, damaging free radicals, specifically cytotoxic oxygen radicals, without interfering with the beneficial free radicals that our body actually needs for cellular signaling.
So it's like a microscopic smart bomb for inflammation.
Exactly.
And a major component of this recovery protocol was a specific supplement called perfect aminos. When you're pushing your body to the absolute limit, breaking down muscle fibers every single day, you desperately need protein to rebuild. But traditional protein sources like whey powder or heavy meats, they require massive amounts of digestive energy, and they often result in high amounts of nitrogen waste that the kidneys then have to filter.
which is the very last thing you want when your kiddies are already under stress from dehydration and myoglobin.
Right. So these specific aminos are formulated to be 99% absorbable by the body. They are the exact essential building blocks the muscle needs, with virtually zero caloric load and almost no nitrogen waste.
So they don't break a metabolic fast.
Exactly. They won't break a fast, but they deliver the crucial materials for repair directly into the bloodstream almost instantly.
And the results of this comprehensive biological optimization were not subtle at all. They were immediate and, frankly, dramatic.
Yeah, Gary put Alvaro through the absolute ringer of these therapies for about 10 to 12 days. He was doing the red light, the magnetism, the oxygen, the aminos. And the very next day after completing this intensive onboarding, Alvaro woke up, felt a massive surge of energy, and went out and ran a full 26.2-mile marathon.
Completely on his own.
Just casually. He didn't tell anyone. He just sent Gary a screenshot of his GPS tracker when he was done.
Which accidentally birthed his routine of Marathon Mondays. He just decided to start running a marathon every single Monday to kick off his week.
It is absurd to most people, but it perfectly proves the point. The upgraded hardware could finally handle the massive, extreme software demands his mind was making.
And this highlights a critical lesson about peak performance. We tend to focus entirely on the exertion phase.
Like the grinding part.
Right. We focus on the brutal workout, the long work shift, the stressful presentation. But elite performance is not dictated by how hard you train. It's dictated by how efficiently you recover. Gary Brecka makes a profound observation about modern life. He says that by default, we let our bodies act as the filter for our environment.
We take in all the garbage and force our organs to sort it out.
Exactly. We consume heavily processed, toxic food. We drink tap water full of microplastics and chlorine. We expose ourselves to junk artificial light at midnight. And we internalize chronic stress.
Yeah, we just soak it all in.
And we just expect our liver, our kidneys, our gut microbiome, and our brains to endlessly filter that toxicity out. It requires a massive amount of biological energy just to maintain baseline homeostasis in a toxic environment.
It's exhausting just thinking about the metabolic load of merely surviving a normal Tuesday.
Right. The paradigm shift is to actively filter the environment before it ever hits your biology.
Okay, so how do we do that?
You filter your water. You optimize your light environment by getting morning sun and blocking blue light at night. You supplement the specific nutrients your soil is lacking. You create a pristine environmental input.
So you're taking the load off the organs.
Yes. When your body is no longer fighting a war on multiple fronts just to filter out the modern world, all of that biological energy is freed up. It isn't just surviving anymore. It is primed to thrive and adapt to the deliberate stressors you choose, like running across a desert.
Okay, so we have established the mindset of equanimity, the clutch that separates stimulus from reaction. And we've upgraded the biological hardware to superhuman levels using clinical protocols. But here is the bridge we have to cross. How does this actually translate to daily life?
Yeah, that's the big hurdle.
Because transitioning from elite, high-tech physical protocols and romanticized desert races back to mundane reality is where the vast majority of people stumble. How do you execute massive, overwhelming goals, whether it's running the Sahara, getting a helicopter license, or writing a novel, when you still have to take out the trash, do the laundry, and commute to work?
You just systemize your success. You take these lofty, abstract dreams and you anchor them firmly to the physical world through neurobiology, specifically through a concept called habit stacking.
Habit stacking is an absolute game changer. The traditional idea of building a habit relies on pure willpower. You wake up and say, today I will start meditating for 20 minutes. But you're trying to manifest a brand new behavior out of thin air, which requires massive cognitive effort.
It's exhausting.
Habit stacking bypasses that friction entirely. You take a new habit you want to build, and you physically and sequentially attach it to a trigger or an existing habit that you already do automatically every single day.
It takes advantage of a neurological principle known as Hebbian learning, often summarized as neurons that fire together, wire together.
I've heard that phrase.
Yeah, your brain already has thick, highly efficient neural pathways built for your daily routines. If you know you always turn on the coffee machine every morning, that pathway is solid. Instead of trying to lay down completely new tracks for a hydration habit, you just build a small station on the existing track.
Ah, I see.
You stack the new habit, like drinking a large glass of water, right before you're allowed to press the button on the coffee machine. The established habit becomes the trigger for the new one.
Let's look at how Alvaro and Gary structure their mornings because they are absolute masterclasses in this kind of habit stacking and systemization.
They really are.
Alvaro's morning is incredibly intentional, starting before he even opens his eyes. The very first rule, the phone stays on airplane mode. He absolutely refuses to let the chaos of the world's agenda, the emails, the news, the social media notifications dictate his first conscious thoughts.
That is crucial for protecting the dopamine baseline for the day.
Then, the very first thing he does is list 3 things he is deeply grateful for. This isn't just feel-good fluff. It chemically neutralizes residual cortisol and negativity.
Right.
Then, he moves into active visualization. But he doesn't just sit and think passively. He actually narrates a movie of his ideal future out loud to himself, engaging his auditory processing and connecting deeply to his vision.
From there, he systematically reviews his why, the foundational reasons behind his actions, ensuring that his daily tasks are tethered to that larger purpose we discussed earlier.
He checks his core values to ensure his goals haven't drifted out of alignment with who he wants to be.
He then assesses what he calls his wheel of life. He mentally checks in on the different spokes: career, physical health, relationships, intellect, and spirituality. Only after this profound internal psychological alignment does he move to his physical habit checklist.
And he doesn't just rely on daily planning either. He employs what he calls Sunday rituals, which are intense but brilliant.
I love the Sunday rituals.
On Sunday, he preps all of his meals for the entire week. He sorts every single supplement into daily containers. He picks out his clothes for every day of the week and hangs them up. He even pre-selects the specific audiobooks or podcasts he's going to listen to on his designated runs.
He is systematically eliminating decision fatigue for the next 168 hours.
Which is huge. Decision fatigue is a real phenomenon where the quality of your choices deteriorates after a long session of decision-making. By front-loading all those mundane choices to Sunday, he preserves his cognitive bandwidth during the week for high-leverage problems.
Exactly. Now, contrast Alvaro's deep philosophical morning routine with Gary Brecka's approach, which is a brilliant, highly physical example of gamification.
I love Gary's routine because it is so tactical. He physically mapped out the floor plan of his condo to force himself into massive action.
Yes.
The moment he wakes up, he doesn't sit and ponder the universe. He walks straight into the bathroom, brushes his teeth, and splashes cold water on his face. It is the lowest barrier to entry. It is a tiny, easy momentum builder.
But then comes the gauntlet. To get out of the bathroom and into the rest of his home, he has placed his cold plunge tub directly in his path.
Oh man, right in the way.
Right in the way.
Yeah.
Getting into freezing water right out of a warm, comfortable bed is universally unpleasant. It violates every comfort-seeking instinct we have. But Gary utilizes a mental framework borrowed from David Goggins. Don't negotiate with yourself.
That's a great rule.
The moment you pause to consider if you want to get in, you lose. He solves the internal whining with massive, immediate physical action. He just drops in.
And the physiological response to that cold water is explosive.
Absolutely. The thermal shock of the cold water triggers a massive, prolonged release of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. It clears the morning brain fog instantly, elevates his mood, and creates a massive spike in focus and alertness that lasts for hours.
So once he is out of the plunge, the momentum is undeniable.
Unstoppable.
From there, he steps straight onto a treadmill for 10 minutes to get oxygen flowing through his tissues. Then he moves directly to his red light therapy bed.
And what is waiting for him at the very end of this literal physical hallway of highly optimized healthy habits?
The coffee machine.
Yes.
He literally has to earn his morning coffee by walking through this sequence. It's hilariously relatable. We put these guys on such high pedestals because they run across deserts and decode human genomes, but at the end of the day, Gary Brecka is just a guy relying on basic psychology to bribe himself with a cup of coffee.
He will not allow himself the reward until he walks the path.
If you break massive, intimidating lifestyle changes down to literal footsteps down a hallway, success isn't about conjuring massive amounts of willpower anymore. It just becomes a physical checklist.
It perfectly illustrates the psychology of deconstructing goals. When you have a massive dream, it sits in your brain as an abstraction. It's overwhelming. You have to take that massive dream and break it down into a yearly goal.
Right.
Then you break that yearly goal into quarterly targets, then monthly milestones, then weekly deliverables, and finally you distill it down into a single, actionable daily habit. It completely removes the paralysis of overwhelm.
It turns an abstract dream into a physical algorithm.
Exactly. The source material quotes Tony Robbins perfectly on this point. You can have a goal that is a dream, but the moment you scheduled it, it's a reality.
So let's explore what happens when you've actually mastered all of this. You have your morning routine perfectly dialed in, you have earned your coffee, your cellular biology is optimized, and your mind is an equanimous fortress. Where do you possibly go from there?
Well, according to Alvaro, the answer is never to settle. You turn your focus outward. You look to your community, and you begin searching for the next impossible challenge.
Because human biology and psychology dictate that the pursuit of growth never truly ends, right?
Maintenance is an illusion.
Yeah.
You're either growing or decaying. Once you adapt to and master one level of stress, you are obligated to seek a higher level of stimulus. And for Alvaro, the next level he's undertaking is logistically and physiologically terrifying.
It is called the Great World Race, and the premise alone is exhausting. 7 marathons, on 7 continents, in 7 consecutive days.
It is difficult to fully comprehend the compounding stress that puts on the human organism. The physical trauma of running 183 miles in a week is severe, but the travel logistics are what make it truly punishing.
They start the whole thing by meeting in Cape Town, South Africa. From there, they take a private jet to Antarctica to run the first marathon on the ice in freezing temperatures. Then they immediately fly back to Africa for marathon number 2. Then they board planes to run in Australia, then Asia, then Europe, then South America, finally finishing the 7th marathon in North America, specifically in Miami.
The disruption to the body's circadian rhythm is catastrophic. Your body has multiple internal clocks, a master clock in the brain regulated by light, and peripheral clocks in organs like the liver and muscles.
Okay.
When you cross multiple time zones every single day, these clocks completely desynchronize. Your brain thinks it is midnight, but your muscles are being told it is noon. You are dealing with sleeping upright on airplanes, battling severe jet lag, and wildly fluctuating temperature swings from Antarctic ice to tropical humidity.
All while demanding elite physical performance.
The body has to attempt to adapt to 7 distinct climates in a 168-hour window.
It is absolute physiological chaos. But remember the primary rule from the Sahara Desert. You cannot survive this kind of crucible without a purpose greater than the problem. So what is the new why driving this massive global endeavor?
Alvaro established a beautiful, unifying purpose for this race. He notes that we currently exist in a world that feels incredibly fractured. Despite being more digitally connected than at any point in human history, there is a pervasive sense of division, negativity, conflict, and deep isolation.
And it is important to note here that we are not delving into the politics of that division. We are purely exploring the inspiration and the unifying mission behind this athletic endeavor.
Right.
Alvaro's mission is to actively push back against that sense of isolation. His plan is to carry a massive flag throughout this grueling global race. This flag will be signed by people from all over the world, influencers, business leaders, everyday people, to symbolize that regardless of geography, cultural background, or personal circumstance, we are fundamentally part of one human family.
It is a literal, physical demonstration of unifying movers and shakers globally to prove that we are connected.
It is a sweeping, powerful statement to make while physically suffering across the entire globe. But the most impactful part of this philosophy is that Alvaro and Gary aren't just trying to build unity on a macro global scale. They are also fundamentally rewiring how community and unity are built on a micro level, right in their hometown of Miami.
Let's look at what they call the Creator House. When most people think of networking in Miami, especially for high-level entrepreneurs, influencers, and creators, the immediate association is nightclubs.
Oh, absolutely.
It's late nights, VIP sections, loud music, and massive amounts of alcohol. It's a very specific environment that is highly conducive to superficial connections, but deeply toxic to the body.
It is an environment that actively degrades the biological hardware we just spent all this time talking about optimizing. Alcohol depresses the central nervous system, it ruins sleep architecture, and the environment itself fosters a false sense of connection based on dopamine spikes rather than shared values.
Alvaro and Gary realized that if they wanted to build a truly resilient community, they had to change the environmental baseline. So they created an alternative, a creator house focused entirely on health optimization and collective leveling up.
Instead of clinking glasses of champagne at 2 a.m. to close a deal or network, people were bonding by getting into freezing cold plunges together at sunrise.
I love that.
They brought in heavy workout equipment and challenged each other to max squat competitions. They led massive group breathwork classes. They entirely replaced the traditional social lubricant of alcohol with the shared vulnerability of physical exertion and deliberate health optimization.
It fundamentally alters the neurological basis of the relationships formed there. When you endure a controlled physical struggle with someone, like the shock of a cold plunge or the burn of a heavy lift, your brain releases oxytocin,
The bonding hormone.
a hormone associated with bonding and trust. Exactly. It mimics a mild form of trauma bonding, creating deep, instant solidarity. If we tie this back to Alvaro's concept of the wheel of life, it is the perfect synthesis of his philosophy. Being an ultimate human isn't just about peaking in your financial career or having an elite VO2 max.
Right, it's the whole wheel.
It is about ensuring every single spoke on the wheel is strong. You have to aggressively level up your relationships, your intellect, and your spirituality with the same intensity you apply to your fitness. Surrounding yourself with a community of peers who actively demand excellence from you and want to see you succeed, rather than an environment that fosters jealousy, competition, or bad habits, is perhaps the ultimate life hack.
You elevate the standard of the group, and the group inevitably elevates you.
Exactly.
It is truly a masterclass in intentional living. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started in the blistering, bloody sands of the Sahara Desert, dissecting exactly how a massive sense of purpose can literally override the brain's governor and push through acute kidney failure.
Yeah, that was intense.
We explored the clinical biological hardware upgrades from red light therapy to hydrogen water required to build a superhuman baseline. We broke down the neurology of habit stacking and laughed about gamifying a condo hallway just to earn a cup of coffee. And ultimately, we've seen how all of this intense internal work must eventually translate outward into building a resilient community that elevates you and seeks to unify the world.
It is a phenomenal, highly actionable blueprint for human growth. But as we've seen, every single external achievement starts with mastering the internal environment. And I want to leave everyone with a final thought today, building on a statistic that we discussed earlier, which I still find deeply unsettling.
The shock study.
Yes, we talked about the psychological study revealing that a vast majority of people would literally choose the acute physical pain of an electric shock over simply sitting alone in silence with their own thoughts for 15 minutes.
It is a terrifying reflection of our modern mental state.
It truly is. So the challenge I want to offer is this. If we as a society are so terrified of the quiet that we would choose physical trauma to avoid it, what invisible weight are you carrying every single day without even realizing it?
Wow.
What negative narrative, what unhealed stress is running in the background while you constantly distract yourself with noise, podcasts, and scrolling? Tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone to check your email and flood your brain with the world's agenda, what if you just sat in total silence for 5 minutes? Wait, scratch that. What if you sat in total silence and finally allowed yourself to see what you've been running from?
That is heavy, but it is the necessary first step. Take that challenge, face the silence, identify your weight, and then use the systems we discussed today to leverage it and level up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.